Among the 32 starting quarterbacks in Week 1, where would you rank Jalen Hurts' performance?
That's really tough. I mean, I think it's got to be somewhere in that 15 to 18 range. I think he won the game, and I think that what kind of goes unnoticed is how good he is in the red zone in his career.
Lombardo in the house. What's up, buddy?
Jeff, great to be here. Thanks for having me. What a Sunday that was. I mean, not just across the NFC East, but across the entire NFL. Upset, standout performances. Just a really fun way to kick off the 2022 season.
Yeah, how about the game last night? That I still don't know what Nathaniel Hackett was thinking.
Yeah, to leave that kind of time on the clock, 20 seconds, and you'd rather attempt a 64-yard field goal when your kicker's last 8 attempts of 60 yards or more were missed, and you pay $242 million for Russell Wilson on 4th and 5. Go for it. Be aggressive here. The NFL is won and lost by the coaches that, gamble in the big spots, that aren't afraid to go for it. And I thought that Nathaniel Hackett did his team a real disservice in that spot.
I was upset too at the postgame news conference. I don't know if you got to see it on NFL Network, but Hackett was just talking really, really fast, out of breath. And I've learned over the years, especially from coaches, when they talk really fast, they just want to get the heck out of there. And they just feel like they're smarter than you. Like there are some coaches like Nick Sirianni who talk fast, but they make sense. Mike McDaniel talk fast, makes sense. Hackett, no.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it was also his head coaching debut, and I think that might have factored into some of it. You don't know if he's ever been in that spot before where he's been, in front of a podium in the immediacy after a game. So I don't read too much into those sort of things. But all of the decisions, the clock management that put them in that spot to not have any timeouts, moving the ball down the field, to put them in that spot not to go for it on 4th down. And let's not forget there's a team on the other side that played really, really well last night. I was really impressed, not only by Gino Smith, and I thought the way that he manipulated the pocket, extended multiple plays that, kind of threw his receivers open. The tight end to Colby Parkinson, the touchdown to tight end Colby Parkinson, he extended that play with his legs, bought him that extra half second to split wide open, get beyond the defense, and made a heck of a throw. And then that defense in Seattle just flying to the football all night long. They forced the turnover down along the goal line. So as much as we can question Nathaniel Hackett's decisions down the stretch, I think the Seahawks, and especially the defense of Gino Smith, deserve a lot of credit for how that game played out.
Contrary to popular opinion, Pete Carroll is a good coach.
Oh yeah, I mean you don't last this long in the NFL and appear in multiple Super Bowls without being one of the brightest coaches in the league. No doubt about that.
So I got to bring up the Dallas Cowboys here. This is what I was talking about before you got on. I just don't know what they do at quarterback. Like I guess Jimmy G is an option, and the 49ers will entertain it. But are you hearing anything about what maybe Dallas could do?
Yeah, there's a couple names out there, and I think the one that could be really fascinating is if you could bring in someone like Cam Newton. I think would make a lot of sense. I think they need that veteran presence, and depending on what happens in Baltimore with everything going on with Lamar Jackson, I know that his self-imposed deadline of a contract extension of the Friday before the regular season came to pass without him getting a guaranteed deal. I kind of wonder if Huntley makes a lot of sense for the Dallas Cowboys, because here's a guy, if the Ravens would part with him, I'm not sure that they would, who's been in big spots, very nearly beat the Green Bay Packers last year in Baltimore, played really well. And I think that he's kind of been that insurance policy against a significant Lamar Jackson injury or against being able to agree to terms on a long-term contract. I think he would make some sense there. And if the Packers are truly committed to moving forward with Aaron Rodgers for at least 2 to 3 more years. And if the Dallas Cowboys are truly concerned about staying afloat this season, which I think they have much bigger issues than quarterback, Jeff, I would make an offer on Jordan Love. I would at least make a phone call to the Green Bay Packers on Jordan Love, who's a young player, a backup. And not only could he come in and kind of stem the tide while Dak Prescott is out, but he could be that situation where if Dak Prescott falters in the next couple of years, he's kind of in that same spot as he is in Green Bay behind Aaron Rodgers. He could be that next man up.
Jerry Jones does decide to roll with Cooper Rush again. What does that tell you about the state of his football team?
I think it tells you that they're committed to Dak and they're not going to rock the boat with Dak Prescott. And listen, Jeff, I think that, talking to people inside the league, there's a really strong belief, and I think we talked about this last time, that the Eagles are now the team to beat in the NFC East, especially after everything that went on this offseason in Dallas, trading away Amari Cooper, letting Cedric Wilson walk out the door, La'el Collins walks out the door. That offensive line is in a state of shambles right now. That wide receiving core is depending on some young players who haven't been in big spots before, and CeeDee Lamb making a significant leap in his second year. That's a really tall order, especially behind an offensive line that's kind of a shell of itself of what it was over the last 3 to 5 years when it was a tough offensive line. So I don't know that the Cowboys deciding not to go and get a quarterback to bridge the gap between now and when Dak Prescott is healthy says too much about the state of the franchise, because I think that Jerry Jones has to know, after watching what happened against Tom Brady and against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday night, with or without Dak Prescott, there are fundamental flaws with this football team, and I don't know how you turn it around this year with the pieces they currently have.
I have declared after week one, it may be an overreaction, it may not. I think they're done. Just look at the schedule, just looking at how bad they were Sunday. What say you? Are the Dallas Cowboys done?
I think it's a real chance. I think there's a real chance that they underestimated how hard it would be to make up for the talent that they let walk out of that building over the offseason. And they didn't really do much to replace them either. I mean, you look at the NFL draft and you look at the fact that 6 wide receivers were taken in the first 20 picks. You look at multiple second-round draft picks who are coming in and making immediate impacts over the course of training camp and with high expectations going into the season. You trade away Amari Cooper and then you don't draft a receiver until round 3 in a historically deep draft class. To me, that was a miscalculation. To me, letting that offensive line deteriorate and kind of resting on your laurels of what they had in place, where you leave yourself paper thin to the point that a Tyron Smith injury just debilitates your offensive line. And it runs counter to what Howie Roseman has been able to do at a really high level in Philadelphia, and that is, regardless of who the starting offensive line is, they've invested first and second round picks over the last 4 or 5 years on the offensive line, making sure that that 2 deep is stacked with players that not only are quality depth players, but could be high-end starters in the NFL when called upon. And I think they're starting to see the fruits of that labor and starting to see the dividends of those investments in the line over the last couple of years.
Eagles gave up 35 points to what I thought was a good Lions offense, and Jonathan Gannon's head was pretty much on a silver platter Monday. And that's, to me, that's not an overreaction. I just don't think he had a good game this week.
Yeah, I think that down the stretch in the fourth quarter, I thought that they really were getting dominated along the line of scrimmage. DeAndre Swift really started to pick up steam in that fourth quarter. They kind of let the Lions hang in that football game. And to me, I thought that a lot of what you saw early in terms of the pass rush, getting to Jared Goff, forcing him into some bad decisions, getting a couple of sacks, I thought that went away in the fourth quarter. And I think that if they learned anything from that game, and they have a big test coming up on Monday night against the Minnesota Vikings and Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. I think if they learned anything, it has to be that you can't take your foot off the gas pedal late. And I know that missed tackles were an issue early too, and you saw that on the first touchdown run. But I thought they did some nice things early in the game. It just didn't translate until late in the fourth quarter.
What was the one thing you did like that defense did?
I thought that, the secondary played really well. I thought Darius Slay had a nice game. And, of course, James Bradbury with that interception taken to the house, an interception return for a touchdown in his first game in an Eagles uniform. I think that was kind of a signal that it's going to be tough to throw on this team by and large because of all of the talent they have on the back end. So I think the coverage on the perimeter, I thought they did really well.
Nakobe Dean played just 3 snaps Sunday. And, we knew he was on the second team. I didn't think he was going to play much, but 3 snaps, maybe he's the answer for their missed tackle problem?
Yeah, I think they also need to get more snaps for Jordan Davis. I thought that the Lions had a lot of success running the football when Jordan Davis wasn't on the field, to the point where I think the yards per carry average something like doubled when Jordan Davis was on the bench. And I think that, they have to know what they have in Jordan Davis in terms of being an interior pass rusher, a space eater, a run stuffer, all of those things. I think they need to find a way to get him more snaps. I don't know if that comes down to personnel. I don't know if that comes down to conditioning on his part, whatever the case may be. You see the difference that he makes as a rookie immediately. I think they need to get him on the field as much as possible to continue making that kind of an impact.
My week 2 column, or week 1 column, I should say, it's not a no reaction column, but one thing we learned about each team. And I said this with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm leaning to the Eagles on this, but I said worrying about Tom Brady in that passing game is unwarranted stress. And I feel like the same with Devonta Smith. Do you really care he didn't catch a pass on Sunday?
I don't, only because I think that when you saw the first quarter of that game and you saw Jalen Hurts open up 0 for 5 passing and they committed to the running game, and then they started to really funnel the ball through A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown was wide open on the other side. That's when things really started to click for Jalen Hurts. And I think that when you have a young quarterback, if it's early in the season, I think you need to do what works to get him into a rhythm. And I thought they did that by focusing on A.J. Brown. And look, there are going to be weeks where you have A.J. Brown matched up against the top cornerback. It's going to happen this week with Patrick Peterson, still playing at a really high level. There are going to be weeks where A.J. Brown isn't the kind of factor that he was on Sunday, and that's going to create opportunities for Devonta Smith. But I think the combination of figuring out what worked for Jalen Hurts in that particular game and A.J. Brown just looking like an elite number one game-changing wide receiver, you feed the hot hand. And I think that that's kind of what went into Devonta Smith getting lost in the shuffle a little bit there. And I think that there's a real good chance against the Vikings that you might see Minnesota kind of sell out to take away A.J. Brown, and that's going to create opportunities and create space for Devonta Smith. And if the Vikings do that, I don't think we're talking about Devonta Smith not having a catch in week 2.
Among the 32 starting quarterbacks in week 1, where would you rank Jalen Hurts' performance?
That's really tough. I mean, I think it's got to be somewhere in that 15 to 18 range. I think he won the game. And I think that, what kind of goes unnoticed is how good he is in the red zone in his career. A lot of it is the rushing touchdowns. He has 16, 17 rushing touchdowns now after the game on Sunday. 29 red zone touchdowns that he's a part of in his career. I think he's better in the red zone than some people give him credit for. I think the Eagles' red zone offense did what it needed to do, scoring on 3 of 5 trips. They won the football game. He kind of did what he needed to do, but I think there's still a lot of room for growth for him as a passer, from 20 to 20. And I think that that's going to be one of the boxes he needs to check for the Eagles to commit to him long term.
What do you need to see from him?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the conversation we had preseason, Jeff. It's one of those things where I don't know that I'm going to get lost in the shuffle of evaluating play to play, week to week when it comes to Jalen Hurts. But if you look up at year's end and the Eagles are an 11 or 12 win football team, with now that you see what's happening in Dallas, I think that's a real possibility. You get them twice. The schedule isn't exactly murderer's row for Philadelphia. But if they win 11 or 12 games, they win the division. He has 35 plus touchdowns, under 15 interceptions. If you have that kind of a year, I'd be pretty reluctant to let him walk out the building or to move on and invest those 2 first-round picks into drafting his replacement. I'd rather build around that type of a quarterback.
My stat of the week was the Giants had 2 60-yard plays in the third quarter alone, Matt. Did you know they only had 1 60-yard play all of last year? What impact has Brian Dable made on this football team already?
Jeff, if you told me they had 1 60-yard play since 2018, I would have believed you. I mean, that's just a team that hasn't been well coached, for the last, 3-4 seasons up there. I think that what Brian Dable did, he got his team to really buy into the aggressive mindset. And you saw that with the 2-point conversion, going for it there. I liked some of the concepts in the running game. And I think that, we talked about this before the season started, that they were going to make a concerted effort to get Saquon Barkley involved in space. And you saw that, in some of the zone blocking schemes up front that worked really well, opening up some big running lanes. You saw that on some of the swing passes to Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. Everything they talked about doing, putting him in a position to be a player in space. They did a lot of that against Tennessee. And credit to Saquon Barkley. Here's a guy who's spent the entire offseason telling anybody who would listen that he was on a mission to silence his critics and that, write him off at your own peril. He goes out and he has 2 50-yard runs for the first time since 2018 in that game against Tennessee. So I think that what Brian Dable did is he got his team to buy in, and I think they found a way to involve some of their biggest playmakers, even if it's pretty puzzling that Kadarius Toney was on the field for only 7 snaps.
Why was Kadarius Toney not playing that much? Every time he came in, I thought he made a play.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, Jeff, he's been pretty banged up through training camp. I don't think that he was on the field in practice as much as maybe the coaching staff would have liked to have seen him involved in the offense. And I think that just getting that familiarity in game speed maybe that's something that has to do with him not being on the field against the Titans. But I think that this goes back to kind of the conversation that we had in Philadelphia with Jordan Davis. You need to get your playmakers on the field. You need to get the guys who can make a difference and make an impact on the game, in the game as much as possible. And I thought that if there was one misstep by Brian Dable and the staff, it was not involving Kadarius Toney enough in the opener.
So after watching the game, I thought Daniel Jones was okay. But then I realized he had 115 passer rating. Probably was the quietest good game I've seen any quarterback in week one.
That's kind of Daniel Jones's MO, right? I mean, when he has good games, he just kind of you say, okay, that's he's capable of that, but he doesn't really set the world on fire while he's doing it. I thought it was a really gutty performance, but a couple of the interceptions late were really bad decisions. And Brian Dable it was pretty obvious how Brian Dable felt on the sideline in that interaction they had on the bench after the pick in the fourth quarter. But to his credit, led them back, showed a lot of guts, a lot of heart, especially on that scramble for a first down to keep the Giants' drive going that eventually was the go-ahead score. So I think Daniel Jones turning that game around, especially late, is something that Giants fans can be excited about.
With a healthy Saquon Barkley, and let's just say the Giants are getting the 2018 version all year, what is their outlook? Are they still just a 6-7 win team, or can we expect maybe a little more out of them?
I mean, if they play the way they did on Sunday and that defense plays the way that it does, they could be a 9-win team. If you have a running back who's going to be rushing for 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, obviously you're going to be in the mix to control the game for much of the season. But I still think, there's just not a lot of depth at wide receiver in New York. I think that the defense still is a couple of pieces away from being really dominant. You didn't see Kayvon Thibodeau on Sunday, so I think that getting him on the field and getting him healthy is going to be a nice boost for that defense. But the schedule breaks really nicely for them too. They have 3 really winnable games coming up, 2 of them at MetLife Stadium. They could be a team that you look up at the end of September and they're 3-1, and you're thinking, all right, maybe they can be an 8-9 win football team.
Speaking of the other team that plays at MetLife Stadium, I was a little upset with Robert Saleh yesterday. Saying, I forget the exact quote, Matt.
He's going to keep receipts on the teams that criticize the fans that criticize the Jets, right? That was
that's the one. That was the one. And I'm just thinking to myself, I think he said something too about like we weren't outplayed or something like that. Or I'm like, yeah, you were. It feels like right now the Jets are kind of delusional about what they actually are.
Yeah, and this goes back to again what we talked about the last time I was on the show. I think that you need to kind of reevaluate, recalibrate your expectations when you lose Zach Wilson for the first month of the season and you're playing the AFC North, right? You're a young football team. You have some nice pieces. You have some speed at wide receiver. I think that defense is up and coming. Joe Flacco just kind of is what he is at this point of his career. I don't think that you can ask him to put a team on its back and go win a football game or win multiple games for you. I think that kind of the hubris and the attitude coming from Robert Saleh and the Jets after that game might be a little bit misplaced. But I'm going to kind of withhold judgment on the Jets and what they are until I see Dwayne Brown back on the field, until I see Zach Wilson especially back on the field, and seeing what that offense can be with its franchise quarterback behind center.
Yeah, that's a shame with the Jets, Matt. Sorry, just they don't have Mekhi Becton, like you said. They don't have Dwayne Brown. Their offensive line's in shambles right now. They had to move stuff around, but overall, outside of Joe Flacco throwing 59 times, I kind of liked a little bit what I saw out of the receiving game. And I know Brees Hall had a bad fumble, but out of the running backs, I didn't think it was a bad offensive performance outside of the point scored.
No, and Michael Carter ran really hard too. I thought, especially in the first quarter, he had 2 runs of 12 yards or more and really explosive runs at that. They can have a really nice backfield duo. They have some really fun pieces at wide receiver. You brought up Elijah Moore and his speed. They obviously have Wilson as well. So, there's some pieces there on offense where you can, get the quarterback back healthy. Maybe Dwayne Brown comes back and plays at a reasonably high level. The Jets can be a tough out. They can be a tough team to beat. But again, it comes down to getting consistently high-level quarterback play. And you just can't expect that out of a guy like Joe Flacco at this stage of his career behind that line.
So the Commanders game, to me, I thought that was one of the more entertaining games of the week just because you got the roller coaster ride. that was Carson Wentz, and you had Jacksonville. It looked like they were going to pull off the upset a little bit, but then turnovers eventually reared their ugly head. What was your initial thoughts on that game?
Yeah, my initial thoughts there were, Jeff, I think we've all been pretty critical of Carson Wentz, and for good reason. I think he's given, the media, fans, and analysts a lot of ammunition over the last couple of years, especially after what happened in Indianapolis and how that season ended. Credit where it's due. I thought Carson Wentz had a really gutty performance on that final drive, bouncing back from the incredible play by Trayvon Walker and the interception that really made you think late that, okay, here we go again with Carson Wentz. The Commanders are going to blow another game, blow another lead. The Jaguars are going to beat them. The Jaguars have his number. And he goes down and leads a game-winning drive, hits Jahan Dodson for his second touchdown of the game winner, and gets the job done. I think that my big takeaway was that was kind of a monkey off the back game for Carson Wentz, especially after how his season ended a year ago against the same Jaguars, especially the adversity he had to overcome in the middle of the game. I'll be fascinated to see if that translates in weeks 2, 3, and 4 for Carson Wentz, if he turns a corner here. And I think the other thing is, Jahan Dodson made an immediate impact. You and I talked about it before the season began. I'm still kind of surprised by the lack of fanfare that Dodson received going into the draft, because I thought he had one of the best catch radiuses in this class. He obviously has really good hands, can get behind the defense and all of those things. He showed as a rookie, the only rookie in the NFL to catch a touchdown, let alone 2 touchdowns, that he could be a focal point of that offense. And I think his skill set really lends him to be one of Carson Wentz's, if not Carson Wentz's, number 1 target.
It seemed like those two, and maybe it was from training camp, but those two are in sync. Like Carson threw some really good passes to him, and Dotson just knew where the ball was going to be both times.
Oh, for sure. And especially on the 2 touchdowns and the second one into a really tight window with the defender kind of draped all over his back in the corner there. I thought that was a really, really nice play by Jahan Dodson, and I think it was a great read and an even better throw by Carson Wentz. I think the Jaguars are going to be a lot better, and I think that they're a team that's going to build as you go along, and they kind of realize, how to deploy their personnel. I think James Robinson should be the Jaguars' number 1 running back. I think you saw that with Travis Etienne and the drops in the passing game. Might have dropped 2 touchdowns. But I think the big picture there is that was a pretty good football team that they were able to come back against and beat. And I think that's the type of win the Commanders can build on if Carson Wentz can find some sort of consistency and stability over the next several weeks, kind of build some rhythm.
Yeah. I've been hyping up Washington's receivers all offseason. And I said, if Curtis Samuel is back and if Jahan Dotson can do, both my ifs came true. Like, Curtis Samuel is back. Jahan Dotson is what we thought he was going to be. Oh, and Terry McLaurin had a really nice touchdown on Sunday, too. Can they win the NFC East with this receiving corps?
And Antonio Gibson, a guy who can catch the ball to the backfield as well and is pretty versatile, too. Yeah, I think that we all went into this season kind of looking at the Eagles and Cowboys as the 2-team race in the division. They have the pieces, and especially they did this on Sunday without Chase Young. You put Chase Young back into that equation at defensive end. That's a really talented front seven with a lot of former first-round picks. Yeah, it all comes down to, as it has all along, Carson Wentz turning a corner, especially in clutch moments. He did it Sunday. Can he do it for the rest of the year?
I don't know if you got to hear any of the post-game stuff. It felt like Doug Peterson really didn't want to talk about Carson that much. And Carson really just avoided the whole Doug Pearson question entirely, gave his typical Carson Wentz answer. And I'm kind of like, I know these two get along, but it feels like there's still some bad blood there between them and on how it ended.
Yeah, and I think, in a lot of ways on both sides there. I don't know how committed Doug Peterson was to Carson Wentz, towards the end there in Philadelphia. And I think that there was always some resentment about the whole situation with the Eagles from Carson Wentz, from the moment that Nick Foles, won the Lombardo trophy in that Super Bowl in Minnesota. I think that relationship, just as much of the Eagles locker room, was kind of fractured by the Carson Wentz situation towards the end. So, no, it doesn't surprise me that neither Doug Peterson or Carson Wentz would want to, take a trip down that particular memory lane.
Yeah, it's a shame, too, because I thought the Eagles really had something there with those two, and obviously then Nick Foles happened and you get the statue and everything else. Like, I get it from Carson's perspective. I honestly think 2018 was the year where everything just kind of fell apart because he did it again, and maybe Doug had some reservations there, but it was just a really weird exchange between both of them. And I knew Carson was going to give the answer he gave, fine, but Doug was kind of surprising. Like, they were talking midfield for a while, but still, he just didn't give anything. Like, oh, I'm focused on the Jacksonville Jaguars now, and I'm like, you don't have anything good to say about a guy who it played a big role in getting you a Super Bowl, probably giving you a second job in the league. It just seemed really awkward.
Yeah, I think the counter argument to that, Jeff, is that it's right after the game. It's right after a game that his team had a fourth quarter lead and they lost. I mean, that question is probably better served, from the reporter being asked on a Wednesday or Thursday going into the game rather than after the game. So I kind of get it from that perspective. And I also think that in a lot of ways, if Carson Wentz doesn't get banged up in 2018 and have the back injury, if Carson Wentz doesn't have the concussion and not play really well before it against the Seahawks in the playoff game, and the Eagles, make it to another NFC championship game or further, or if Carson Wentz takes the kind of steps the Eagles anticipated him taking when they took him number 2 overall, and the steps he was making before the injury in 2017, we might still be talking about Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson being in Philadelphia, and maybe the way that it ended for Doug, there might be some blame from Doug Peterson on Carson Wentz and kind of regressing and failing to live up to the hype and expectations that might be a source of any sort of acrimony between the two from Doug's side of things.
What was the team that was better than you thought in week 1 and the team that was worse than you thought in week 1?
Oh, the Steelers are the better team by far. I mean, I didn't expect Mitchell Trubisky to go into Cincinnati and be able to do that. I certainly didn't expect the defense to, post 6 sacks on Joe Burrow. I didn't expect them to intercept him 5 times. And listen, the Steelers played that typical Pittsburgh Steeler brand of football. Your quarterback manages the game. Your defense flies to the football. You have the pick 6 from Minkah Fitzpatrick. He also blocks the field goal. They run the football well with Najee Harris. That's a brand of football that travels. And it's why Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season. It's why they're always in the mix. They were the team that I thought really surpassed expectations. And the team that played worse than I expected, I think it's the New England Patriots. And, they never play well in Miami. Miami, I love the gamesmanship of them donning the white jerseys at home when they typically wear their light green to force New England into wearing the navy blue on a 98-degree day. But I didn't think Mac Jones played all that well. I thought that defense got torched, by Tua, especially, in the second half. So I think the team that played worse for me, it was either the Green Bay Packers, which we kind of expected them to stumble with that receiving core, but I think the way that it went for the Patriots on the road, I think that was the one for me that didn't really live up to expectations.
My final thought on week 1, I think if Christian Watson doesn't drop that touchdown pass, I think that game completely changes. I think Aaron Rodgers had every right to mention that because that was a great play. The great play call by Matt LaFleur, the first play. He was so wide open. I think you and I could have caught that pass.
Yeah, and what the universe is sometimes pretty cruel and ironic because I have 3 TVs set up. I have Red Zone on one, the 2 games on the other. Within seconds of each other, Jeff, of that drop pass in Minnesota by Christian Watson, Devontae Adams catches a pass in traffic from Derek Carr in Los Angeles and takes it 25 yards within seconds of that happening. And you're just watching this unfold, and it was kind of the juxtaposition of, the Packers thought that they would be able to move past Devontae Adams and spread that cap room around. And, Aaron Rodgers has other weapons, and he's a Hall of Fame quarterback and all of these things. Devontae Adams is still a number 1 wide receiver in this league. If you put him in that offense, the Packers might be the runaway favorite in the NFC. And now I'm not so sure that they are going to be even the prohibitive favorite in the NFC North because I think the Vikings have all the pieces in place to surprise some people and make a run in that division and maybe further than that.
You led right into my last question, Matt. This is why I love having you on. Name the top 5 teams in the NFC after week 1.
Top 5 teams in the NFC after week 1. I think you have to put Minnesota in that mix. Tampa Bay handling its business. I know that Tom Brady wasn't exactly prolific, but going on the road in a tough environment, shutting down the Cowboys offense and what they are, I think you put Tampa Bay in that conversation. I still think the Eagles belong in that conversation as well. I know that the game was a little bit closer than a lot of people might have expected, but it's tough to win on the road in the NFL. They went on the road and did that. And then the other 2 in the NFC, it comes down to, put them all in a hat. I mean, you can look at Washington and what they did in the comeback. Maybe they're in that conversation. And in the NFC West, boy, that division, other than San Francisco, who I think might not be quite what people expected them to be. I'm not sure that Trey Lance is going to be what people expected him to be this season either. That division feels pretty wide open, especially after Arizona fell flat as well. So I'll give you three. I think the three best teams are Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Tampa Bay. Beyond that, nobody really rose above for me in the NFC.
Sounds great, Matt. Once again, I'm going to have you on. I love this conversation. Great insight, as usual. Matt Lombardo, everybody. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.